vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sati Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mokum Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Lankayate Girim Yatripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam. So thank you all for joining us today on this wonderful occasion. I just want to start off by asking all of you, I want to make it as interactive as possible. Normally when we give a talk, we do like some interactivity. I'm a teacher by profession, and I always like to engage with my audience. So please, and there's no wrong answer. So whatever you feel in your heart, just write it in the chat box. But I just want to start off by asking all of you a question. What do you think the word criticism means? When you hear the word criticism, what comes into your mind? So if you just write down either privately or publicly in the chat box, what do you feel when you hear the word criticism? What comes into your mind? What comes into your heart and soul? Negativity, thank you for sending that. Is there anything else? Seeing fault in others, thank you so much, Govinda Prabhu. Yes, seeing fault in others, definitely. When we hear the word criticism, we see the fault in others. Negativity, someone said negativity. When we hear the word criticism, it has a very negative connotation to it, right? When we hear the word criticism, immediately all of these negative thoughts come into our mind, right? And it's really interesting that in our mind, negativity is always amplified. Have you ever noticed that? When you read a negative newspaper article or something on Facebook or Instagram, our mind just gravitates towards that article, right? We want to open it up, we want to see what's written in there. But when we read something positive, we just glance at it. We don't give it a second thought, we just scroll past it, right? So our mind is, sometimes it's criticizing other people, sometimes it's critical to ourselves. But actually, criticism is being used in everyday life. If you think about the restaurants, right? Restaurants are being critiqued. If you think about apps will have a star rating and you'll download an app according to the star rating. If you think about schools, right? Schools will be critiqued. They're critiqued by Ofsted. Before you send your child to a school, you will always check the Ofsted rating. So criticism is part of our daily life. Srila Prabhupada, he gave this story. I'm sure many of you have heard this story. How there was a grandfather, a young boy, and a donkey. And they went to 3 villages. So the first village, they were walking side by side. So when they arrived at the first village, all the villagers criticized these 3 people. They said, the grandfather and the young child, they have a donkey, and yet they walked to this village. How unintelligent are these people? So the grandfather thought, okay, before we get to the next village, let me ride the donkey and my grandson will walk along me. So they arrived to the second village, and what happened? They got criticized again. They said, look at this young boy. This old man is making this young boy walk so many miles. How can this grandfather do this? So they got criticized. The grandfather thought, okay, the third village, surely they won't criticize us, right? So what did they do? The grandfather put the young child onto the donkey and the grandfather walked. So when they reached the third village, what happened? The villagers criticized them again. They said, look at this young boy. His grandfather is so old, so frail, can barely walk, and yet he's being made to walk. So in life, we have criticism all around us, right? Every single day. In the workplace, some of you might have experienced feedback, 360 degrees feedback, where you get feedback from your peers, from your juniors, and from your superiors. So whatever we do, there is always an element of feedback. So the question is, how do we deal with criticism? How do we deal with criticism? So I want to ask you this question. How do you feel? And you can either answer it in the chat box or privately. But how do you feel? Thank you, Bharati. Could be constructive. Yes, that's a good point, and we'll discuss that shortly. How do you feel? How do you feel when someone criticizes you? I want to be honest. How do you feel when someone is very critical of the work you do or how you speak or the things you do? How does that make you feel? Hurt? Thank you. Yeah. Defensive? Absolutely. Right? We call this inner denial. We want to talk about this. We get defensive straight away, right? We have this inner denial. Thank you, Sumed. Very nice point. Okay, let me ask you another question. How do you feel if someone criticizes you, but actually they are wrong? You know deep down in your heart, when you're getting criticized, I've done nothing wrong. How does that make you feel? Super hurt. Yes, absolutely right. It's even more painful. If someone is criticizing you and you've done nothing wrong, angry, thank you. It makes you feel angry, right? It makes you feel even more painful. Okay, let me ask you the third question. How do you feel when someone criticizes you, but they might be right? How do you feel when someone criticizes you, but what they're saying, there might be an element of truth in it? How do you feel? Upset? Thank you, Govinda. Upset? Thoughtful? Yes, so you kind of meditate on it? Absolutely. You see, the first thing we do when someone gives us feedback, and someone mentioned it earlier, is to have this inner denial. Why do we deny things straight away? Why do we become very defensive straight away? You see, we think ourselves to be infallible. And actually, if we look deep within us, to admit to our own mistakes is very painful, right? Very, very painful. If we think we are perfect, if we are imperfect, it's actually very painful to our ego because our ego thinks I'm always right. In our heads, there are always two worlds. There's a good world and a bad world. And we place ourselves always in the good world, isn't it? We never think, actually, have I committed any mistakes? And it's very interesting. When we don't look within us, what happens? There is conflict, there is blame, there is arguments, right? We've seen it all. This is Kali Yuga, age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So it's very interesting, right? So my next question to all of you would be, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with us becoming too defensive, with us looking at faults from other people? How do we stop these inner denials? Any thoughts? Yes, someone's messaged me. Thank you. In introspection, try to tolerate it. Thank you. Some really nice points. When someone criticizes us, the first thing we should do is consciously see, have I made a mistake? You see, instantly it neutralizes a conversation. If someone approaches us and they say, Prabhu Mataji, I want to give you some feedback, I want to talk to you about something I'm not happy with. And rather than becoming defensive and in a denial, is actually, yeah, have I done something wrong? And as soon as we have that approach, it neutralizes the conversation. Then the other person then, calms down, and the way he or she approaches you is a very different way. There was one story of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. He had two disciples. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj is the guru of Srila Prabhupada. And he had two disciples who really did not get on. And it was amazing what he did. I'm sure all of you know this story, but it was amazing what he did. He put two of these people in the same room, and he asked both of these disciples to say something good about the other person, right? Please say something good about the other person. They were struggling, they really struggled because in their mind, they really did not like this person. So then eventually, one person said, well, the other person, he can lead Arati nicely. And as soon as person B heard this, something changed in his heart. And this person B, what did they do? They then said something nice about the other person, right? And like this, they went back and forth. So when we admit to our mistakes, when we start speaking positive things, it really neutralizes that conversation. Really, really important. And it's amazing. Have you ever thought, you know, when you take a picture on your phone, you always use a lens. So even though the scenery looks a certain way, to make it look even better, we change the lens, right? And it's the same thing in life. Whenever life gives us a situation, we have to use a certain lens in order to see that situation in a better light. I mean, it's so interesting. Psychology, I read a lot of books on psychology, and it talks a lot about this mindset. You know, we always think that the other person who I don't get on with, the other person is always wrong, there's something wrong with that person. Can no one else see it? Is it just me, Krishna? Is it just me that only sees this person's faults? Or is it anyone else that can agree with me? Have you ever thought that the other person is probably thinking the same thing about you? They're probably thinking, can no one else see my faults? You know? And in psychology, in leadership, we use this model. It's very spiritual. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Perfect. So this is a model that we use in leadership. So the first thing, it's called the Johari Window, and it's very, very spiritual. Very, very spiritual. We teach this to the youth in Birmingham. We just taught it last week. There's 4 quadrants to this. The first quadrant in the top left-hand corner, I want you to imagine things that you know about yourself and things that other people know about you. So an example to this is you might know that you're a caring person, and the other person might know that you are a caring person, right? So that's that quadrant. In the bottom left, this is known as the hidden quadrant. So these are things that you know about yourself, other people don't know. I remember one time I was asking, someone was telling me, a speaker, they said, actually, Mayapur, you know, before I give a talk, I get very nervous. And this was something that none of us thought. You know, this person's a great speaker, he gets nervous. And yet that's something he knew about himself, but none of us knew about him. And then the bottom right, this is the unknown. So these are things that we don't know about ourselves and other people don't know about us as well. This is the unconscious self. And the top right-hand quadrant, this is what I want to focus on today. These are our blind spots. These are things that other people might see that we might not see. And it could be positive things. It could be that we don't see ourselves as being kind. But other people might say, actually, you're very kind. So these are our blind spots. So when someone is giving feedback, we've got to think, is there any truth in this? Is there something that I can work on? And we've got to understand that this self-criticism or this self-care, it doesn't need to be negative. It doesn't need to be negative. We just have to see, is there something that I can improve in myself? Have I made a mistake? We've got to change that perception. Leonardo da Vinci, who's a very famous artist, and his paintings are worth millions of pounds, as all of you know. Whenever he drew a painting, he would always place a mirror in front of the painting, and he would look into the mirror to see his painting from a different perspective. If you look at athletes, Michael Jordan, if you look at, you know, Mohamed Salah, in Manchester, you've got Manchester City, Manchester United, all of these players, they do a lot of self-improvement. They analyze themselves. What mistakes am I making? How can I improve myself? So this is really important. When someone gives us feedback, the first stage is, have I done something wrong? That's the recap. And if I haven't done anything wrong, then is Krishna telling me, or Krishna is saying to me, this is what not to do. This is what not to do. If you know you haven't done something wrong, then Krishna's given us a sign that this is something that we shouldn't do. There was one example, if you've heard of this sannyas in ISKCON called Satsvarup Maharaj. He's a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he wrote Prabhupada Leelamrit. So one day he was sitting in the temple and he was chanting his rounds. And this new person came into the room and he approached Maharaj and he said, Maharaj, can I just speak to you about something? Maharaj said, sure. What would you like to speak to me about? And he said, Maharaj, the way you're chanting Hare Krishna is not the proper way. You're missing some syllables. Can you imagine a new person like coming and saying this to a Maharaj? So Maharaj, he took this feedback on board. And what did he do? He wrote this book called the Japa Reform Book. Can you imagine Maharaj, he took this feedback. He looked actually, what this person is saying, is there any truth to this? What is my blind spot? And then he wrote a whole book about how to improve japa. So wonderful. So yes, we've got to be self-critical, but more important than being self-critical is being self-compassionate. We shouldn't, this is a caveat here, we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. As we know, we have imperfect senses. We make mistakes. We make mistakes, we have imperfect senses. Sometimes we have to have this mask, right? We have this mask of, we've got to be perfect. My relationships are perfect. My family is perfect. I've got to portray that I'm perfect. And what happens is people, they love this person, right? This mask, and they don't appreciate us for who I am, right? And what happens then is then we seek validation, there's insecurities, and so many other mental problems and issues. So we make mistakes. We talk about mistakes. I remember in Birmingham, in our management meetings that we have, we're trying to become more vulnerable. Vulnerable is such a big thing in leadership. You know, we don't have to portray ourselves as being someone who's perfect. To be vulnerable with the right people, that is, who are spiritually mature, who have your best interests at heart. If you are vulnerable, then what you're saying essentially is, I'm not perfect. I'm trying to serve Krishna. I make mistakes, and when I make mistakes, I'm happy for us to be corrected. And what we started in Birmingham, the whole leadership in Birmingham, we asked for feedback. We had a 360 degrees model. We sent a link to the whole congregation. We had 60 responses, and they responded about me, about the other three devotees in Birmingham. And it's important that we look at that feedback. How can I improve? What is the congregation saying about me? You know, am I doing things properly? Am I serving them? Am I doing things sincerely? Is there something I'm missing? And, you know, Staparu gave this feedback to us, and it was brilliant. It's very, very powerful. We want to do it every year. And we want our extended leadership team to also conduct this feedback, which is very useful. Very, very useful. So let's move on to the next slide. Are there any questions at this point? I can't see the chat box, Pranatharashwu. If there are any questions, please just let me know.
Yeah, there are no questions, Prabhu.
Okay, perfect. So that's, you know, how to receive feedback. But let's read this verse from Gita. It's such a wonderful verse. This is chapter 18, verse 28. This is Krishna speaking. He says, the worker who is always engaged in work against the injunctions of the scripture, who is materialistic, obstinate, cheating, and this is the important part here for our class, and expert in insulting others, and who is lazy, always morose, and procrastinating, is said to be a worker in the mode of ignorance. If we have a book with everyone's bad qualities, right, then we are expert in insulting other people. This is the mode of ignorance. Krishna is clearly saying this in Gita. This is the mode of ignorance. We have to ask ourselves, why does this happen? Why do we feel the need to give feedback, right? If you're in a responsible position, if you have a relationship with someone, then yes, you can give, you know, feedback. We can talk to the person. But sometimes you have people who constantly want to give critical feedback, right? We've got to ask ourselves, why is that? Why do people feel the need to always criticize, to always gossip, to always put people down. Essentially, it's about feeding our ego. Why do you want to give feedback constantly to other people? It's because we want to feed our ego. If we put other people down, what does that do? It makes us feel better, right? When we put other people down, it makes ourselves feel better. And this is an issue straight away. This is superiority complex, where we put others down in pursuance of promoting ourselves. So Shastra, it says 4 reasons why do we criticize others. The first reason is being idle. I want to read you a letter by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. It's so important in Nectar of Devotion. It says that we should engage our senses in the service of Krishna. Krishna consciousness is not about taking anything away. It's about adding Krishna into our life, engaging ourselves in service. We are too busy, we're too busy to criticize and gossip. There's no time. There's no time. We don't have time to have, village katha and have this idle gossiping, criticizing, because we're constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, constantly engaged in the service of Srila. We have this debt, we have this debt to our spiritual teacher, to Srila Prabhupada, and we don't have any time to criticize and gossip. So being idle is an issue. Being disgruntled, right? It happens, let's be honest. We have to be honest here. It happens. People do get upset. And I always say, if you're upset and you find 1 or 2 people that you can open your heart to, that's fine. You got to let off some steam, that's fine. It's healthy, right? We have 1 or 2 people that we go to, a mentor, a guide, a temple, guide. Then we can just get something off our chest, seek advice. They have to be spiritually mature, obviously. But it happens, if we are constantly disgruntled with the community, then we will speak ill of them, right? And it's really subtle, it's very nuanced. When we read Bhagavatam, when we read Gita, we'll always find points that we can use against someone else. So rather than reading Bhagavatam, reading Gita, and nourishing it and really relishing every single message, every single word, we are using these statements against other people, right? You see it on Facebook, you see it here, there, people quoting left, right, and center because they're disgruntled, they want to put their point across. The 2 I want to focus on is this superiority complex and being envy and being envious. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting, this point. When we criticize people, and I want you to think about this, it's a yes or no question. When we criticize someone, does it change them? When we openly criticize someone, does it ever change that person the way we approach it? Never. Never does it change a person. If we're approaching a person with really harsh criticism, it will never change that person. Rather, it will create conflict, anger, as someone mentioned earlier. So where in our scriptures does it talk about the superiority complex? In Bhagavatam Canto 4, we read the story of Daksha and Shiva. This is an amazing Gita, Rudra Gita. And we teach Bhagavatam to the 60 students in Birmingham that we teach Bhagavatam. So we have canto by canto. So Canto 4 is just it's a wonderful book, wonderful book. So much, Dhruva Katha, Rudra Katha, all of these amazing stories that we can learn something from. So here, Daksha, as all of you know, I'm sure you're aware, he is the father-in-law of Shiva. But he has this kind of desire to be respected, right? So one day he was walking into a gathering and everyone stood up to greet Daksha. But Lord Shiva didn't stand up. Now Bhagavatam explains that Lord Shiva was in a trance. He was in a transcendental trance. So actually he didn't have to stand up. But what happened? Daksha saw this. And whatever was in his heart just came out. Straight away came out. And he was cursing Lord Shiva. Now what does Bhagavatam say about Lord Shiva? Vaishnavanam yatha Shambhu. That Lord Shiva is the greatest Vaishnava. In Bhagavatam 12th canto, it's a wonderful verse. It says that out of all the rivers, Ganga is the holiest. Out of all the devatas, Achyuta, Krishna is the greatest. The 3rd stanza is Vaishnavanam yatha Shambhu. That all the Vaishnavas, Lord Shiva is the greatest. And then Purananam idam yatha. Out of all the holy books, Bhagavatam is the greatest. So Shiva just tolerated. He just tolerated. But who didn't tolerate? Who didn't tolerate? Nandeshwara, Lord Shiva's devotee, Lord Shiva's friend. So now you had Daksha cursing Lord Shiva. Now you've got Nandeshwara cursing, counter-cursing Daksha. And then all of this counter-curse was going on. Even Brighu, who is the priest of the demigods, he started counter-cursing, you know. Everyone got involved, right? It happens sometimes, you'll see, you know. Hopefully you won't see it, but it happens, right? This argument, you know, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook or face-to-face, you know, I've seen people arguing who's going to give Jamashtami, you know, the Arti on Jamashtami, right? Pujaris are arguing. It's Jamashtami, and all they're thinking of is, I want to do the Arti, and someone else wants to do the Arti, right? So what is the consciousness? What is the consciousness? So Daksha, what happened to him? As we know, it led to the downfall of Daksha. So why does someone feel the need? Let's look at this more granularly. Why does someone feel the need to criticize? We said the four things: being idle, disgruntled, spiritual complex, and envy. Envy is something we can spend the whole kata just on envy. And in Bhagavatam, the second verse in Bhagavatam, it describes how, and Bhagavatam is such an amazing book. The first verse, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, just on the first verse, which talks about Christian superiority, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj spent 10 days speaking on that verse every single day. 10 days speaking on that one verse every single day. That's how deep Bhagavatam is. The second verse, it says, how should one read Bhagavatam? So the verse says, one who should read Bhagavatam should be pure-hearted. So to be pure-hearted means not to be envious, right? Envious is so destructive. What does envy mean? Envy means someone else's distress is your happiness. And someone else's happiness is your distress. Such a destructive thing to have. So why does someone feel this? I want to share with you this letter. It's a wonderful letter. This is scripture, you know. Such a wonderful, this was one of the final instructions from Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. We'll just read it out. All the residents of the Mat should always be engaged in the service of Shri Hari, Guru, and Vaishnava. We said one should not be idle. We don't have time to gossip, to criticize, because we're too busy in our service. They should always be engaged in hearing and discussing Hari Katha. Gita, in the 10th chapter, Krishna's opulence, is such a wonderful chapter. In the first few verses, Krishna is talking. Arjuna has not spoken in Gita since 8.2. Verse 8.2, Arjuna has not spoken. The whole of chapter 9, such a wonderful chapter. Krishna talks just about bhakti. You know, pratam pushpam palamti, manmana bhava yajo, yat krosi, yat asnasi. All of these wonderful verses come in chapter 9, right? Arjuna has not spoken. So still Krishna is speaking in chapter 10. And he says that the sages can't understand me. Lord Brahma can't understand me. Bhrigu Muni, the 4 Kumaras, none of these people can understand me. So who can understand me? My devotee. And then he says in verse Chatushlok in 9, 10, and 8, 9, 10, 11, Hari Katha. He says, what do devotees do when they get together? They talk about Krishna. They talk about Krishna. You know, competition in spiritual life, there is competition. But the competition spiritually is how can I push other people forward? That's competition. I want to push every single devotee forward, right? And the other devotees want to push me forward. That's the right spiritual competition to have. Very powerful. So what do devotees do? They speak Hari Katha. They talk about Krishna. What does Krishna say? Tesam satayuktanam, bhajata pritipurvakam. What does Krishna do? How does Krishna reciprocate? He gives them direct inspiration, direct instruction in the heart. So let's read on. If one becomes adverse to Harikatha and Hariseva, then again one will become entangled in material desires. Then one's time will be spent in gossiping, criticizing others, fighting with others, and gratifying one's senses. If the residents of the Mat do not understand that Vaishnav Seva is the most beneficial thing, then they will not make progress in the realm of devotion. One has to cultivate their Krishna consciousness by sincerely serving the Vaishnavas and by endeavoring to please the Vaishnavas with mind, body, and soul. By the petition of the Vaishnava, mercy comes through the Vaishnava. We all know this. Merciful Krishna will give his mercy to the sinful soul. This we have to remember all the time. We are living together to help each other serve the Lord. We will not live in this world very long. How long will we be here for? If we spend all our life criticizing, arguing, gossiping, all our years will go ahead. If we die, if we can die while constantly doing Hari Kirtan, then our birth will be successful. It's a wonderful letter, and it just shows the importance of Vaishnav Seva, right? We all know that there are 4 types of aparad. Aparad itself means to be Radha, to be without Radharani's mercy. So within aparad, you have Vaishnava aparad, you have Seva aparad to the deity, you have Nama aparad, and you have Jiva aparad. Even in Nama aparad, the first offense of chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra that we do 16 rounds a day for 2 hours is Vaishnav Ninda, to blaspheme the devotees who have propagated the life chanting of the holy name, the Mahamantra of the holy name. That's the first offense within Namaparad, is Vaishnava Parad. And Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught 3 tenets. What did he teach? Jivadoya, help other people. Vaishnav Seva, serve the Vaishnavas. And Nam Ruchi, develop taste for chanting Krishna's name. It's a wonderful letter to meditate on. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Oh, this is another thing I wanted to share about Vaishnavism. This is in Bhagavatam. Jada Bharat was speaking to Maharaja Rahugana, and this is a very famous story. Jada Bharat, the 3 lives, he became Bharat Maharaj, Deya, and then Jada Bharat. This is his translation. This is what he says. So he's speaking to the king, right? This is his 3rd birth, and he was carrying the king's palanquin. But because he was carrying the king's palanquin, he didn't want to step on ants. Right? We said the 4th offense, Jiva Doya, offense to any other living entity. So Jada Bharat, he didn't want to step on the ants. So he was, dotting around the ants. So the king became very angry. And then this whole conversation took place. So what did Jada Bharat say? He said, "My dear sir, I'm not at all afraid of the thunderbolt of King Indra, nor am I afraid of the serpentine, piercing trident of Lord Shiva. I do not care about the punishment of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, nor am I afraid of fire, scorching sun, moon, wind, nor the weapons of Kuvera. Yet I am afraid of offending a Brahmana. I am very afraid of this."
And then send in the...
And then Srila Prabhupada in the purple, he describes about Vaishnav Aparad. So we'll see this in all of our scriptures. We'll see this emphasis on respecting others. So why do we feel, we've had so many classes and we've gone to so many seminars, so many sanghas, we've read Bhagavatam, we still feel, this superior complex, we still feel the need, we have envy, all of these things, right? Why does that happen, I remember one time I was just observing at school, and one child said, I got 3 A's to another student, and the other student said, I got 3 A stars, right? Straight away, just straight away. I got 3 A's, the other person I got 3 A stars. Why say that? Because they wanted, to have the superiority complex over someone else. So it is deeply scripted. It's deeply scripted in the education system. It is deeply scripted, and we'll talk about this shortly. So what can we do to help ourselves if we are feeling envious, if we are feeling this kind of ego, we want to get one over someone else? What should we do? The first thing we should do is stop comparing ourselves to someone else. Krishna says in Gita chapter 2, every soul is amazing. Every single one of us has something to offer. Every single one of us is good at something. We might not be that kirtaniya, we might not be the best cook, but we might be a great fundraiser. We might be a great events manager. We might be a great preacher, a book distributor. There is something, and Krishna says in the Gita, he says it twice in the Gita, it is better to perform your duty imperfectly than to perform someone else's duty perfectly. Krishna says it. So it's understanding, what am I good at? So the first thing we have to do is stop comparing ourselves, and it's very easily said than done, because in psychology there might be issues from childhood. There might be issues with parenting. Bhagavatam teaches us from 0 to 5, we give love to our child, pure love, and you'll see this work. From 5 to 15, we can give discipline. Because we've given that love, there is that respect, there's a discipline. When they're 15, that child will become our best friend. This is what is being taught. So we have to stop comparing ourselves with other people. And like I said, it's easily said than done, because there might be insecurities. Why do we compare ourselves? Because we're insecure. We're insecure about ourselves. I'm not too good. Why am I not getting any recognition, right? Why is that person getting the limelight? Well, I can also sing, but I can also cook. The first thing we have to do is stop comparing ourselves to someone else. And it means we have to really focus on ourselves and focus on our bhajan. Because we pray to Krishna, Krishna, this is who I am. And please engage me in your service. When we're chanting, what's the prayer? The prayer is, please engage me in your service. I want to serve you. We don't have time to serve ourselves. And sometimes when people are young, they hear things like, you're ugly, you're fat, you're not good enough, right? All of these negative things, and it can lead to insecurities. And therefore that person has to seek validation from different places, right? So we have to become very compassionate with other people as well. Why is that person feeling the need to feel superior? Because they have insecurities. So it's better to be very compassionate. The second thing I would say, and it lines in what we said earlier, is take value of who you are. So we stop comparing ourselves, but we take value of who we are. And like we said, Krishna says in the Gita, every soul is amazing. And I just want to end on this verse. So we understand, if we hear feedback, just a quick recap, if we hear feedback, is there any truth to this? If there is, we work on it. If there isn't, we tolerate it, and we see it as a message from Krishna that this is what I shouldn't be doing. If we want to give feedback, the first thing we should see is, well, am I being idle? Am I disgruntled? Am I envious? Am I having this ego complex over someone else? And if we're not, and we still want to say something, then okay, Krishna says fine. This is what Krishna says, how to speak. I'm sure all of you know this verse. In chapter 17, verse 15, Krishna says, austerity of speech consists of speaking words that are truthful. Satyam. Prabhu, I'm going to say it as it is. Krishna has said to me, I can be truthful. I'm going to say it. I'm going to just tell you as it is. Sit down. Are you ready for it? I've got my notebook out. Right? I'm going to say it as it is. But then that person hasn't read the rest of the verse. Krishna says, Priyam, pleasing. The words should be pleasing. Hitam, they should be beneficial. So yes, we want to speak the truth, but we want to make sure it's packaged in a way that's pleasing, it's beneficial, not agitating to others. How often do our words agitate people? We've all made mistakes. And also regularly reciting Vedic literature. Is it in line with Shastra? So I've kind of taken this, well, I haven't taken this, but these key themes, and I've put it into an analogy or think. So with a think, when we give feedback, we have to think T. First thing is what we're saying true? Is there an element of what we are thinking in our mind? Is there an element that is not true? Of course there is. Because our mind will add scenes, it will add verses, it will add other people, that things that have not happened. The mind will add all of these things into that situation to magnify it. The first thing we should think, is it true? The H, is what I'm going to say helpful? Krishna says, is it beneficial? The I, before we give feedback, is it going to be inspiring? Krishna says, is it pleasing? Is it not agitating to others? Is it inspiring what we're going to say? Because we don't want to put anyone else down. We don't want to stop anyone else's bhakti. You know, it's so difficult when devotees come into the picture. I'm so sorry, my son is here. I'm just giving a class. What happened? Okay, good boy. No, you go over there. Good boy. Okay, do you open this? There you go. Sorry. Just close the door again. Thank you. So with I, is it inspiring? The N, is what I'm going to say necessary? 9 times out of 10, before, you know, we all get upset, the best thing to do is sleep on it. You know, don't send that email, don't send that message, that WhatsApp message, that text message, sleep on it. And I guarantee, you know, 9 times out of 10, when you wake up, it wasn't necessary. You know, but in that heat of the moment, you know, we've all done it, sending those emails, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Send, right? They reply and waiting for the response and we want to respond again straight away. It's just the ego. It's just the ego. So is it necessary? And the last thing with the K, is what we want to say kind? Is what we want to say kind? We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to end on 2 stories. The first story is taken from our scriptures. It's a wonderful story.
Prabhu, you can take more time, no problem.
Oh, no. Thank you, Ru. I have to put Ram Raghav to sleep. So he should be in bed by 7:30. So it's okay. But I want to end on two stories. The first story is about Vaishnava Aparadh. So there was this eagle. This eagle was flying with a snake, a poisonous snake in its mouth. At the same time, there was a king of this kingdom, and he was giving out food to the Brahmanas. So he's giving out food to the Brahmanas. As this eagle was flying over the kingdom, a drop of poison from the dead snake fell into the food, which the king gave out to a Brahmana. So what happened? The Brahmana died. So Chitragupta, who is the right-hand person of Yamaraj, he was confused. Now Chitragupta writes all of our good deeds and bad deeds down, right? In Gaur Leela we hear about when he opened up the scroll of Jagayamada, he was just shocked. You know, he couldn't believe what Jagayamada did and how Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What happened? Okay, thank you. Shall I keep it? I'll open it. Okay, there we go. I'll do it later, is that okay? Go. You want to sit there? You want to sit? Like this? Sorry. Maharaja, can you just close the door, please? Thank you. So as this eagle was flying over, the poison fell in and this Brahmana passed away. So Chitragupta, he was confused. He asked Yamaraj, who takes the karma for killing this Brahmana? Is it the bird, the eagle, who flew over the kingdom? Is it the dead snake? Is it the king? Or is it the Brahmana himself? So Yamaraj said, just wait and see what happens. So a couple of days later, so other Brahmanas, they came from outside, they wanted to see the king. So as they were approaching the kingdom, they asked the lady, which way is the king's kingdom? Where's the king's palace? I want to go and see the king. So the, just 1 second, sorry. Come. Okay. Thank you. No, I'm purposely giving a talk. Thank you. It's 5 minutes. Come on, guys, say hello. Come. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Chairman. See, Papa giving a talk. Okay, 5 more minutes and then we go, okay? Okay, just 1 second. Just 1 second. Thank you, Guru. Sorry about that, everyone. I apologize. You can't go wrong with life, can you? So, with this, Ram, just give me 5 minutes. Probably give me 1 second. I think he wants to put the light on. That's what he wants to do. Just 1 second. Problem solved. Sorry about that, everyone. So Chitragupta, he was confused, and Yamaraj gave the advice, wait a couple of days. So what happened? The Brahmanas came to the kingdom. They were asking for directions, and they asked a lady. A lady was just standing by the street, and they asked the lady, "Where is the king's palace?" So the lady said, "The king's palace is this way." And then she said, "But he's a killer of Brahmanas." Right? She said that he is a killer of Brahmanas. As soon as she said that, Chitragupta gave the karmic reaction of killing a Brahmana to her. This is what happened, you know. So we have to be very careful what we say. You know, in Kali Yuga, what we think, we don't get karma for, thankfully. But what we think is sometimes it comes out through our tongue, through our actions. So we have to be very careful. What are we thinking? What are we saying? And the second story that I want to end is the story of a sweet mango and a bitter mango. So in our lives, we have sweet association and bitter association. I think all of us can agree to that, right? We have sweet association and bitter association, just like mangoes. And in Gauriya Vaishnav tradition, especially in our meals, we have things like Kerala, Neem. These are all bitter things, right? Now, why do you have bitter things first? Why do we experience bitter things first? Because when we have bitter things first, the sweeter things will taste even sweeter. The sweeter things will taste even sweeter. So in our lives, yes, we have amazing association. But when we have, you know, bitterness, then when we are in the company of those devotees in that association, it's even more sweeter. We relish it even more. We appreciate it even more. And as one progresses on their bhakti, on the path of devotion, then actually there's only one bitter mango. As a Vaishnava progresses on the bhakti, then they realize, actually, I am the bitter mango. Because I have caused so much harm. I have caused so many offenses. I've caused so much hurt to other people. May Krishna find some space to forgive me. So this is how a Vaishnava always thinks, that actually everyone else is more superior, more better than me. So on that note, Gauranga, thank you so much for inviting me. I have to put my son to sleep. But if you have any questions or any comments, if I made any mistakes, please forgive me. I'm happy to be corrected. If there's any comments or questions, then I can take them. A couple of more minutes. Gauranga, over to you.
Yeah, sure. I think devotees must be typing in. So let me. Lalita Preeti, you have a question?
Thank you.
Lalita Preeti, you have a question?
No.
Okay. So I think they must be typing in, Prabhu, but let me say, so thank you so much. That was a fantastic lecture. So really useful, very informative, very enlivening, and very thought-provoking. You've done it so nicely, and we can see that you are a teacher and as well as a leader in presenting this seminar. So let's see if there are any questions here. Thank you very much for such an enlightening class. Really appreciate your time, Hare Krishna. So devotees are thanking. If anybody has any question, they can directly ask. And Neela Mataji raising her hand. Mataji, you can ask directly.
Hare Krishna, Mayapur Madhava Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Prabhu is at Kusum Sarovar at the back. And
So this is Radhakund. So
Radha-
this picture, I was looking for this picture for about 7 years. This is Radhakund and Shamkund.
Oh, right, okay.
This is the
You-
whole of.
Yeah. You don't get that view when you actually go to the Kund.
No, it took me 7 years, Prabhu, every time I went to the dam.
Very nice. It has that architecture of how Kusum Sarovar is built, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm. Nice to see you, bro. Thanks for the talk.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Any other comments or questions from anyone else?
Thank you, Prabhu. I just
Prabhu,
want to
thank you
all
so
to
much
Manchester.
for your time, and really appreciate it.
And we look forward to
love-
seeing you soon. You know, this is the best thing we can do. But we look forward to serving all of you in Birmingham very soon. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. His Grace Mayapur Madhava Prabhu Ki Jai.
Srila
So
Prabhupada.
Yeah. So for Manchester congregation, we got a couple of announcements. So we request all the devotees to kindly pray for well-being of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. Currently, so he's in a critical situation. He's still, Maharaj is still in intensive care. So we humbly request all the devotees to take some time out and pray for Maharaj's well-being. So tomorrow, being first Saturday of the month, we have a monthly Mangalarti program. Unfortunately, we can't gather in the temple, so there will be a lecture, Zoom lecture again in the morning, starting from 8 o'clock. We have been doing the series of 12 Mahajanas. So the Mahajana for tomorrow is Shukadev Goswami. So please take time to attend tomorrow class starting from 8 a.m. And then on Sunday, we have special guest speakers from ISKCON Chowpatty, His Grace Sridhama Prabhu and his good wife, Kishori Mataji. They will be speaking on dynamics of Guru and Disciple. It is a Guru Purnima, and also it is starting of Chaturmasya. So these are the announcements. So thank you very much, and we really appreciate and hoping to see you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you for organizing. Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.